Welcome everybody to the Scale Up Show. This is your host Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have Jordan Wilson. Jordan is the founder, based in Chicago, like me, of Everyday AI, which is a media and consulting company dedicated to helping everyday people understand core use cases of AI in their business. Does a live stream podcast every day, free daily newsletter, does great work. I was on it, I don't know, maybe it was like a month and a half ago, man. And so I appreciate the fact that you wake up early and kick people's day off and starting this. So welcome. Happy to have you on the show, man.
Oh, Ryan. Hey, I'm glad I could kind of return the favor. Yeah, thanks for that little intro. But yeah, I'm happy to talk with someone else who is as passionate about AI as I am. It doesn't happen a lot where you can just straight up, dork out. So happy to be on the show, and thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem, man. Let the nerdery begin. Let the nerdery begin. Okay. So we will get into it. And it's awesome too on my side because I don't have my kids rolling their eyes when I'm telling them to try a new prompt or a new tool or using them as a guinea pig, right? So huge wins all around. So today, man, like I don't know. I love the fact that you have lots of hot takes, right? So I love the strong opinions. Probably something I need to get a little bit better at, man. I need a little bit stronger opinion on my side, but I know you've spent a lot of time keeping up with the news and what's going on. So as where it stands as of today, we're in June of 2024. What's your overall perspective of the landscape of generative AI, where it's going, and then we'll get much deeper into many other topics, but I want to hear your take on that to start.
Yeah, and it depends on the day you ask me, right? And I'm glad you said it's June 2024 because, people may be listening to this in July 2024, may listen to what we're saying and think that we're from the Stone Age, right? Because that's how quickly things change. So, the state of generative AI, I think it is both extremely exciting and slightly terrifying at the same time. Just when you see, new models, right? A month or so ago, we saw, GPT 4.0 from OpenAI, and, you have new updates from Google with their Gemini 1.5 Flash. And, so when you see all these new things and new capabilities and not just, traditional large language models and becoming more multimodal, but then you have, new updates from, software companies like 11 Labs, and now you can generate sound effects with text, and Suno, where you can hum something and it creates an entire song. So it is both exciting as someone that kind of follows it and talks about it every day, but also a little frightening because if you would have asked me maybe 3 years ago or even 4 years ago, our team's been using generative AI and the GPT technology since it was publicly released in late 2020. If you would have told me then that we would be at the place that we are today in June 2024, I would have told you were absolutely crazy and that there was no way that any of this would happen. But here we are every day, waking up and scratching our heads, looking at what's happening and saying, there's no way this is happening.
Yeah, totally agree, man. It's like I don't know. Did you ever see that? This is like a stinker of a movie, but did you ever see like Weird Al Yankovic's UHF movie at all? Do you remember that or no?
No, I remember so many like Weird Al like parody songs, but I don't think I saw that movie.
Okay. So basically, there's a part where there's on the game show, and the kid has to drink from the fire hose, and they literally show a little kid just getting blasted in the face with a full on fire hose and getting shot across the room. That's like a visual depiction of what you just described right there. So one of the things I want to talk about, man, is like in light of what we just discussed, right? One of the things that I see is there's a wide range of adoption with companies right now. Okay. We have some that are all on board and are trying to implement it into their product as well as their people. Others that are like, hey, we'll get to that. It's not a priority right now. I don't have any KPIs around it. So what's your take on companies that are still on the fence?
Catastrophic decision to still be sitting on the fence in what we're heading into Q3 here. Catastrophic, right? If your company is still on the fence on generative AI, it's you're almost asking for a smaller competitor to come eat up your market share, right? So this, I mean, The easiest analogy, which maybe people get tired of hearing, but it's like if you were still writing off the internet in the early 2000s, right? You can't, right? Like if you really want to compete and if you want to grow your company in 2024, and if you want to last, I don't even care if you're an 8, 9 figure company. If you're not using generative AI, you are just making you're making your own bed, and you're not going to want to lay in it because it is going to be a nightmare. And by the time you wake up from said nightmare, it might be too late, right? Because both your smaller competitors that may be a little more nimble in ways that they can more quickly implement generative AI, and maybe let's say your middle market, and then you have your enterprise competitors that are larger, and maybe they've been working on their own large language model behind the scenes, and they just rolled it out. Like you are doomed if I'm not pessimistic in that take. That is just reality, right? Like think if you worked through the whole 2000s, right? The decade of the 2000s, the entire decade without using the internet, right? This is after the big .com boom of the 90s. Imagine going through the year 2000 to 2009 without using the internet. It's not possible. I don't know if any company could have done that, right? Like you think of from your email, from how you capture inbound leads to how you research your competitors. Like you couldn't do that in a whole decade without the internet. Just like in 2024, I literally don't think companies are going to continue to exist, or at least continue to thrive, without using generative AI and without integrating it into your day-to-day workflow.
Okay. And that's what I was going to ask, man. Because, like, I love that analogy 2000, 2009 without using the internet. I might repurpose that in a little bit different way and use that for some of my conversations. So that's a great narrative, and it hits home because it's true, right? So, I mean, another analogy I give is it's like you're using a flip phone, everybody else is like on an iPhone 14 or 15, right? It's not the same. And so, when you say integrating it into your workflow and using generative AI as a company, give me some examples of what you're talking about, because I have my views on it, but want to hear your take on it as well.
Yeah, and I think sometimes business leaders can overcomplicate this. I think when you hear someone like me or like you say integrate generative AI, it can be like, all right, well, what does that mean? It is simpler than I think a lot of people think. I think some people, when they hear that phrase, they say, okay, well, that means we need to build our own large language model. That means we need to you know bring in RAG and fine tune a model around our company's domain and our expertise. And it's like, yeah, if you can do that, fantastic. But like I am talking literal, like your day to day of your employees. So if you are a Microsoft organization, you need to have Microsoft 365 Copilot on each and every machine, right? If you are a decision maker at your organization, you should probably, and I'm not paid or sponsored by Microsoft to say this, but you should probably be buying the new PC that's coming out June 18th, right? And you should be replacing all of your PCs, because some of these new PCs that are powered by Microsoft's new NPU, essentially, if you think of the how your browser has history, right? Your entire computer will have history, right? If you granted access. So, that PowerPoint from last week, that website from 3 weeks ago, that email, right? It's all going to have that in its context, anything that's been on your screen, right? So simple things like that. If you're a Microsoft organization, you should have Microsoft 365 Copilot on every single PC. You should probably be upgrading all of your PCs to have this kind of these new capabilities that are coming out. I mean, things as simple as your browser, right? I'm actually a big, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this out loud, but I love Microsoft's browser. I love their Edge browser. It has built-in Copilot. You should be using tools like Perplexity and ChatGPT instead of Google. If you are still using traditional search engines, you are wasting hours a day potentially, right? If you're researching something in your industry news, white papers, etc., right? If you're still reading through 50-page PDFs to pull out that one little tidbit that's relevant for you or your company, all of these things that are part of our day-to-day tasks, you should be using generative AI. You have to understand it. You have to implement it correctly. You have to use the right tool at the right time for the right purpose. But if even outside of oh, let's build our own model. Yeah, that's great, and that's conversations that companies should be having, especially as inference and compute and training costs come down and GPU capabilities go up. However, like you need to be picking off all the low hanging fruit, because there are literally just bushels of it waiting to be grabbed, and if you don't, your competitors will.
Yeah, I love that, man. I'm in total agreement with you because yeah, I think like here's the thing, like 4.0 is basically free now, right?
Mhm.
So, and what I'm seeing is that leaders will sometimes delegate and just like say, "Oh, well, my team will learn how to use it," without like taking ownership themselves. And I think personally, that's one of the biggest mistakes I see because like they need to lead by example and understand it. It's not a SaaS solution; it's an alien life form that operates completely different. And if they don't understand that as a leader, it's hard to facilitate an organization of innovation and collaboration around it. What do you see as the biggest mistake folks make with LLMs?
Not knowing what they are, not knowing how to use them, not knowing the pros and cons, right? So even something as simple as internet connectivity, right? It's very different between all of those different models, right? The internet connectivity of GPT-4o, the paid version versus the free version, very different capabilities. With Copilot, very different capabilities. With Gemini, very different capabilities. With Claude Opus, very different capabilities. So business leaders, you have to understand the basics of a large language model, how it works, how you can quickly bring in new information for the model to work with and to keep it in its context window, to cut down on hallucinations. So, think of how good, well, hopefully how good most of your coworkers and colleagues, or maybe people in your industry, are at using the internet. It's the exact same thing, right? Like simple things like Boolean search, right? Like in a search engine, right? You need those tips, tricks, best practices, and you need to actually understand what a large language model is, because if you don't understand it at its core, you are probably going to misuse it, and you could end up doing more harm than good.
I agree with you. What do you think is the biggest risk that people make in terms of doing more harm than good? Give me an example of what you're thinking.
Yeah. I mean, a good one is just not understanding things like a knowledge cutoff, right? Uh, no knock on, like a Claude Opus, but, Anthropic's Claude is not connected to the internet. And I see a lot of business users, or sorry, business leaders, trying to, be consultants and say, oh, you should be using Anthropic's Claude because it's better at this, this, and this. And it's like, okay, well, it might be true. However, I wouldn't touch Anthropic's Claude right now, right? Personally, because it's not connected to the internet. And think of everything that we do, right? As business leaders trying to scale our companies, right? A lot of it requires up to date information, right? So, even which I know sounds crazy, but if you aren't using an internet connected large language model, that's a mistake, right? Because think of, no matter what line of work you're in, and I know knowledge cutoff dates always change, but for the most part, you're working with training data that is 18 months old or older at the best case, right? So
Yeah.
think of everything that you work on a day-to-day basis. And if you're using a large language model, I'm not trying to just, drag Claude through the mud. I'm just pulling out an example of a popular one that's not connected to the internet. You shouldn't be using it. You shouldn't be using it for your day-to-day work, because think of everything that your hands touch. Think of everything that you read, and all of this requires up-to-date information. And you can't be playing with old data in a game that requires split-second, up-to-the-minute decision making.
Yeah, true. Very true, ma'am. Well, unfortunately, we are up on time for episode 1. We are having you back for episode 2, which is going to be awesome. We're going to go through AI tools and workflows, and we're even going to hit on agents a little bit. So before we leave, Jordan, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you?
Yeah, so you already did a great intro. You did the commercial for me, but yeah, we do is every day we go live on LinkedIn, YouTube, so Your Everyday AI or youreverydayai.com, and we have our daily newsletter there as well. So yeah, I'm excited for part 2. Can't wait.
Part 2. We're going to knock the cover off the ball. Well, thank you for joining us today, man, and thank you for joining us as well. And we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks.